I spent 10 years proving I was the steady, responsible sister. But when Lila announced she was marrying an executive from a massive tech giant, I forced myself to stop asking questions. That silence was a mistake. 2 weeks later, he walked into the confidential board meeting I was chairing, wearing a visitor's badge that proved everything was a lie, and he looked at me like I was the next acquisition target. The rain in Briarhaven was not the romantic, misty drizzle people associated with the Pacific Northwest. It was a cold, rhythmic hammering against the floor-to-ceiling glass of the conference room on the 42nd floor. A sound that usually helped me focus. Today, however, it sounded like static interference in my own head. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, reviewing the agenda for the upcoming quarterly governance meeting. At 33, I was the youngest person to ever hold the position of board chair at Northglass Systems, a fact that my supporters called visionary and my detractors called a liability. Northglass was an enterprise platform company, the kind of business that ran the invisible plumbing of the internet. We were boring, profitable, and reliable, or at least, we used to be. For the last 3 months, the water had been choppy. Rumors were swirling about activist investors circling the company, looking for weakness, looking for a way to break us up and sell us for parts. I had spent every waking hour trying to stabilize the ship, projecting a calm I did not feel. My life had become a series of risk assessments. I managed volatility. I managed egos. I managed expectations. But the one thing I could never quite manage was my sister. I closed the folder on the table and rubbed my temples. The meeting was in 2 days. The security protocols were tighter than usual. The guest list scrubbed and verified. I needed everything to be perfect. I needed to show the shareholders that the adult in the room was firmly in charge. I checked my watch. I had to leave. The drive south to Mapleton took 3 hours, and I was already late for the dinner Lila had demanded we have. She had said it was urgent. She had said it was good news. With Lila, news was rarely good. It was usually expensive. The drive down to Oregon gave me time to transition from Anna Simmons, chairwoman, to Anna, the one who cleans up the mess. It was a role I had played since our mother died when I was 20 and Lila was 16. I had finished raising her, or I had tried to, but somewhere along the line, the dynamic had frozen. I was the bank, the safety net, the buzzkill. She was the free spirit, the victim of circumstance, the dreamer. When I pulled into the driveway of the house we had grown up in, which I now paid the property taxes on so our father could live there in peace, I saw Lila's car parked crookedly on the lawn. It was a lease I had co-signed for 6 months ago. I walked inside, shaking off my umbrella. The house smelled of pot roast and Dad's pipe tobacco. It was warm, cluttered, and safe. "Anna, you made it!" Lila shrieked, coming down the hallway. She looked beautiful. She always did. Lila had a way of glowing that made you forgive her for being late, or for forgetting your birthday, or for needing $5,000 for a business idea that involved selling customized crystals. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, something silk and expensive looking. "I'm so glad you are here," she said, hugging me tight. She smelled of expensive perfume and wine. "Come on, Dad is already at the table." We sat down, and the tension was immediate. Lila was vibrating with energy, tapping her manicured fingernails against her wine glass. Dad was eating slowly, looking at her with that mix of affection and exhaustion that had become his default expression. "So," I said, unfolding my napkin, "what is the big news, Lila? Did you get the promotion at the gallery?" Lila laughed. A sharp, tinkling sound. "The gallery? God. Anna, no. I quit that place weeks ago. They were stifling me. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. You quit? Lila, you need health insurance. Stop," she said, holding up a hand. "Just stop with the spreadsheets for 1 second. I do not need the gallery. I do not need anything anymore, because I finally found him." "Found who?" Dad asked, looking up from his potatoes. "The one," Lila said. She beamed, her eyes wide and glittering. "I am engaged." She thrust her left hand across the table. On her finger sat a diamond that was aggressively large. It caught the overhead light and fractured it into a dozen rainbows on the tablecloth. It looked heavy. It looked like a down payment on a house. Engaged? I repeated, my voice flat. Lila? Who? The last I heard. You were seeing that DJ in Portland. That was months ago. She scoffed. This is Derek Vance. We met at a mixer in Seattle 3 months ago. And before you ask, yes, he is solid. He is successful. He is everything you always told me I should look for. I looked at the ring, then at her face. 3 months. Lila? When you know, you know, she said dismissively. And he is not some DJ. Anna? He works in tech. Like you. Well, not like you. He is at a major player. One of the giants. Which one? I asked. The question was automatic. In my world, specifics mattered. Lila waved a hand vaguely. You know, the big one, in the valley. He is a senior executive. He runs strategy or operations. He is incredibly important. He flies everywhere. He works in Silicon Valley? I asked. But you met him in Seattle? He has an office in Seattle, she corrected quickly, and one in San Francisco. He moves around. He is basically in charge of their entire cloud division, or maybe it was the AI division, he told me. But it is all so technical. The point is, Anna, he is loaded, and he adores me. I took a sip of water, trying to swallow the skepticism that tasted like bile in my throat. Which company? Lila? Specifically, Apex, she said confidently. A few minutes later, while dishing out seconds of the roast, she was talking about their future plans. He says we can live anywhere, she said. He can work remotely. He was thinking we could get a place in Lake Oswego, or maybe just move down to California near his headquarters at Velmont. I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. I thought you said he was at Apex? Lila blinked. I did? No, I meant Velmont. They are basically the same thing, aren't they? Big tech, big buildings, lots of money. God, Anna, why do you have to interrogate me? Can't you just be happy that I finally won? I am happy, I said, lying. I just want to know who is joining the family. He treats me like a queen, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, her eyes filling with sudden, performative tears. He listens to me. He says I am brilliant. He says I have just been surrounded by people who do not understand my potential. I flinched. I knew exactly who those people were supposed to be. The rest of the dinner was a blur of Lila talking about wedding venues and honeymoons in the Maldives. She deflected every specific question I asked. Where did he go to school? Some Ivy League. She couldn't remember which. How long has he been at the company? Years. Forever. When can we meet him? Soon. She promised. He is so busy closing a massive deal right now. As I drove back to Briarhaven that night, the windshield wipers slapping against the glass. I tried to rationalize it. Lila exaggerated. That was her language. If the guy was a mid-level manager at a software startup, Lila would turn him into the CEO of Google by the time the story hit the appetizer course. It didn't mean he was a bad person. It just meant Lila was in love with the narrative as much as the man. I told myself to let it go. I told myself that if I pushed too hard, I would just be the villain again, the jealous older sister who couldn't stand to see Lila shine. I told myself to focus on Northglass. I had a board meeting to survive. 2 days later, on the morning of the board meeting, the atmosphere on the 42nd floor was brittle. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, or maybe I was just hypersensitive. My executive assistant, Sarah, met me at the door of my office with a tablet in her hand. She looked annoyed. Good morning, Anna, she said. We have a weird one. I put my briefcase down on the desk. Define weird. I do not have time for weird today. Sarah. I have Gordon Price breathing down my neck about the quarterly projections. I know, she said, but I just got a notification from security downstairs. They just printed a visitor badge for the board session. I stopped. The guest list is closed. It has been closed for 48 hours. No one gets in unless they were vetted by legal. Sarah tapped the screen. I know, but the request came through the system about 20 minutes ago. It was authorized by an internal alias. It looks like it came from the strategy office, but the coding on the request is sloppy. It bypassed the secondary approval queue. I walked over and looked at the tablet. Who is the guest? Derek Vance. Sarah read. My blood ran cold. The name sat there on the digital display. Innocuous and terrifying. Derek Vance? I repeated. You know him? Sarah asked. I think so. I said, but he should not be here. Did the request say who invited him? It says chair's guest. Sarah said. I stared at her. I did not invite him. Well, someone used your override code. Sarah said, or a mirror of it. Do you want me to have security turn him away at the elevator? I hesitated. My mind was racing. If I turned him away, and he caused a scene in the lobby, right when the investors were arriving, it would be a disaster. Gordon Price was already looking for reasons to call me unstable or difficult. A domestic dispute in the lobby of North Glass Systems was exactly the kind of ammunition he would love. If Lila was right, and this man was a high-powered executive, maybe he was here on legitimate business? Maybe the worlds were colliding in a way that was awkward but innocent? No. I said, if he is already badged, let him up. But do not let him into the boardroom until I signal. Put him in the holding suite. I need to see him. I thought, I need to see if he is real. The boardroom was an expansive oval of polished wood and ergonomic leather. 12 people sat around it, men and women who controlled billions of dollars in pension funds and equity. The tension was palpable. We were discussing a potential defensive acquisition, a move to buy a smaller competitor to shore up our market share against Velmont Dynamics, our biggest rival. I was 20 minutes into my opening presentation, outlining the risk factors. When the heavy double doors at the back of the room opened, I stopped speaking. Everyone turned, normally. The doors remained sealed during a session. For them to open meant an emergency or a catastrophic failure of protocol. A man walked in. He was tall, with the kind of jawline that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite and a smile that seemed practiced in a mirror. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, the kind of tailoring that whispered 4 figures. His hair was thick, dark, and swept back with casual precision. It was him. It had to be. He looked exactly like the blurry photo Lila had shown me on her phone, only sharper, more predatory. He didn't look like he had stumbled into the wrong room. He looked like he owned the building. Excuse me. Gordon Price barked from the other end of the table. We are in a closed session. Who are you? The man didn't flinch. He walked straight toward the empty chair at the far end of the table, the observer's seat usually reserved for legal counsel. He looked at me. His eyes were a pale, icy blue. There was no hesitation in them, no apology. He looked at me with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. A look that said, "Hello, Anna. We finally meet. I am Derek Vance," he said. His voice was a rich baritone, smooth and projecting easily to the corners of the room, and I froze, because pinned to the lapel of his expensive Italian suit was a visitor badge. It didn't say Apex, it didn't say Google, it didn't say Velmont. It was a standard-issue white contractor badge. And printed clearly beneath his name were the words, Vendor, Asterly Consulting. Asterly Consulting? It was a nothing firm, a body shop for low-level IT implementation. It was about as far from a tech giant executive as you could get. I stood up, my hands pressing flat against the table to stop them from shaking. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady only through sheer force of will. "You are not on the agenda, and this is a confidential meeting of the Board of Directors of North Glass Systems. You need to leave, immediately." Derek smiled. It was a patronizing, patient smile. I apologized for the intrusion. "Madam Chair, I was under the impression that my perspective on the integration strategy was requested for the second half of the docket. There must be a scheduling error." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the investors. "My firm has done extensive modeling on the acquisition targets you are discussing. I thought it would be valuable." Gordon Price looked at me, his eyebrows raised. "Anna? Did you bring in an outside consultant without clearing it with the governance committee? No, I said sharply. I did not. Derek looked at me, and for a split second, the charm slipped. His eyes went flat. Ah, my mistake then. I will wait outside. He turned and walked out, his movements fluid and unhurried. The doors clicked shut behind him, but the silence he left behind was deafening. The rest of the meeting was a disaster. I rushed through the agenda, my credibility bleeding out with every slide. I could feel Gordon Price watching me, calculating. I could feel the confusion of the other board members. Who was that guy? Why did he act like he knew Anna? Why did he have a badge? As soon as the meeting adjourned, Mara Ellington, our CEO, pulled me into her private office. Mara was 50, battle-hardened, and usually my strongest ally. Today, she looked worried. Anna, she said, closing the door. Who the hell was that? That is Lila's fiancé, I said, sinking into the chair opposite her desk. I felt like I was going to throw up. Mara's eyes widened. The one she was bragging about on Instagram? The tech mogul? I nodded, but his badge said Asterly Consulting. Mara frowned. Asterly? That name sounds familiar. She walked over to her computer and typed quickly. She stared at the screen for a moment, then let out a sharp exhale. I knew it, she muttered. Anna, that guy, Derek Vance. He was here 3 months ago. Here? I asked. At North Glass? He tried to get a meeting with me. Mara said. He sent a cold pitch for strategic advisory services. We vetted him. He had no references, no clear client list. His pitch deck was full of buzzwords, but incredibly vague on details. But the weird part was the questions he kept asking my admin. He didn't ask about our culture or our budget. He asked about our product roadmap. He wanted to know about the launch dates for the Helios platform. Helios was our flagship project. It was top secret. We turned him down. Mara said, security flagged him as a potential corporate spy or just a time waster. We blacklisted his email. I stared at the floor. My sister is marrying a man you blacklisted, and he just walked into your board meeting. Mara said softly. Anna, if Gordon finds out your sister's fiancé is sniffing around our proprietary data. He won't, I said, standing up, because I am going to fix this. Now. I called Lila from my car in the parking garage. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. She answered on the first ring. Hey, did you meet him? Did he swing by? He said he might surprise you. Lila, I said, keeping my voice low. I need you to listen to me. Derek just crashed a confidential board meeting. He walked in wearing a vendor badge for a company called Asterly Consulting. So? Lila said. Her voice was light, unconcerned. He does contract work for them sometimes. He consults for everyone. Anna, I told you, he is in high demand. You told me he was an executive at a tech giant. I said, you said he worked at Apex or Velmont. You said he ran a division. Asterly Consulting is a temp agency. Lila, oh my God. Lila sighed. Why are you so obsessed with titles? He is humble. He doesn't like to brag about his big roles, so he uses his consulting firm for tax reasons. It is smart. You would know that if you weren't so busy trying to catch him in a lie. He lied to the board. Lila, I shouted, losing my composure. He claimed he was invited. He embarrassed me in front of the entire company. Mara told me he tried to pitch them 3 months ago and got rejected. Lila went silent for a second. Then her voice turned icy. You are doing it again, she said. Doing what? Sabotaging me, she spat. You cannot stand that I found someone successful. You cannot stand that I'm happy. You want him to be a fraud so you can be right. So you can be the smart, responsible Anna who has to save poor, stupid Lila. This isn't about you, Lila. This is about my job. He is dangerous. He is amazing, she screamed. And he told me you might be like this. He said successful women like you get threatened when a man enters their space. He warned me you would try to drive a wedge between us. I felt the air leave my lungs. He warned you? Do not talk to me until you can be happy for me," Lila said, and she hung up. I drove home to my empty apartment, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. I needed facts. Lila lived in a world of feelings. I lived in a world of data. I started searching. Derek Vance Seattle, Derek Vance Velmont, Derek Vance Asterly Consulting. The results were terrifyingly clean. There was a LinkedIn profile. It had a professional headshot, the same winning smile, and listed his title as Principal Consultant at Vance Strategic Solutions. Under experience, it listed Confidential Advisor to Fortune 500 companies for the last 10 years. No specific company names, no dates, no colleagues endorsed him for specific skills. I checked the alumni database for the Ivy League schools Lila claimed he attended. No Derek Vance in the graduating classes for the last 15 years. I checked the state business registry for Asterly Consulting. It was an LLC formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Nevada. I searched for images. There were a handful of photos of him on Instagram, tagged by Lila, and a few on a generic-looking business blog. In every photo, he was wearing a suit, holding a glass of scotch, or standing in front of a luxury car. But none of the photos had context. They looked staged. They looked like stock photos of success. There were no news articles, no conference panels, no white papers. For a man who supposedly ran strategy for a tech giant, he was a ghost. But then I found something, buried on page 10 of a search result for a charity gala in San Francisco 3 years ago. It was a group photo. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was Derek. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like the guests. He was wearing a headset. He was standing near the wall, talking to a man who looked like security. He wasn't a guest. He was staff, or he was working an angle. My phone rang, startling me. It was 10 o'clock at night. I looked at the screen. Gordon Price. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello? Gordon? Anna?" Gordon said. His voice was devoid of warmth. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I just had a very disturbing conversation." "Regarding what?" I asked. "Regarding the vote on the acquisition," he said. "I received a call from a shareholder, a significant one. They said they were approached this evening by someone claiming to represent the chair's office." I sat up straight. "I did not authorize anyone to speak to shareholders." "Gordon." "I assumed as much," Gordon said. "But this person seemed to know a great deal about our internal deliberations. They implied that you have already decided to vote against the acquisition. They implied you are looking for a graceful exit strategy because you are overwhelmed. That is a lie." I said, "Who called them?" "They didn't catch the name." Gordon said, "But the caller ID was spoofed to look like it came from your sister's number." My stomach dropped. "Lila," Gordon continued, his voice lowering, "the board is getting jittery. Anna, that display today in the meeting? The stranger with the badge? And now this? It looks like you are losing control of your house. If you can't secure your own perimeter, how can we trust you to secure the company?" I will handle it. Gordon, I promise. You better," he said, "because if the stock price wobbles because of rumors started by your family, we will have to have a very different conversation." The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, the laptop screen glowing blue against my face. It wasn't just that Derek was a liar. It wasn't just that Lila was being scammed. Derek hadn't walked into that boardroom by accident. He hadn't mistakenly entered the wrong session. He had walked in there to be seen. He had walked in there to rattle me. And the phone call to the shareholder? Using Lila's number? He was trying to frame me. He was trying to make it look like I was leaking information through my unstable sister. I looked at the photo of Derek on my screen. That perfect, hollow smile. He wasn't just after Lila's money. She didn't have any. He was after me. He was after Northglass. And he had found the one weakness in my armor that I couldn't defend. My love for a sister who was currently sleeping next to the enemy. I realized 2 truths at once. Derek didn't appear by accident, and someone was effectively making it look like I had opened the door and invited him in. The morning after the board meeting disaster, The silence in my office felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment Derek Vance walked through those double doors. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smile, that practiced, predatory curve of the lips that suggested he knew the punchline to a joke I hadn't even heard yet. I needed to know how he got in, not the vague excuse of a clerical error, but the mechanics of the breach. I sat across from Sonia Cade, Northglass's general counsel, in her office. Sonia was a woman who treated emotions as inefficiencies. She was 50 years old, wore rimless glasses, and had a mind that worked like a diamond cutter. She placed a single sheet of paper on the desk between us. We traced the digital footprint. Sonia said, her voice devoid of inflection, it was not a glitch. Anna, it was a bypass. I leaned forward, studying the log. Explain it to me. The request to add Derek Vance to the guest list originated from an internal email address. Sonia said. Specifically, it looked like it came from the strategy and operations account, but when IT drilled down into the headers, they found it was a spoof. The actual sender routed the request through a third-party scheduling system we use for vendor management. They knew exactly which port was less secure. They knew that if the request came formatted as a vendor priority ticket, the automated system would push it to the security desk without a secondary human review. I felt a chill slide down my spine. That is not something a random person would know. Sonia, that requires knowledge of our back-end protocols. Precisely. Sonia said. She took her glasses off and polished them slowly. Whoever did this knew our workflow. They knew that the security desk is overwhelmed on board meeting days. They timed it perfectly. Could it have been Lila? I asked, the question tasting like ash in my mouth. Sonia looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. Does your sister know how to code an API bridge to spoof an SMTP header? No, I said. She barely knows how to use Excel. Then she did not do the technical work. Sonia said, but she might have provided the access point, or someone used her device, or someone simply watched you work long enough to understand the rhythm of this building. I thought about the night before, the way Derek had looked at me. He hadn't just crashed a meeting, he had executed a penetration test. We are locking down the vendor portal. Sonia continued, and I am scrubbing the logs. But Anna, you need to understand something. This was a warning shot. Someone wanted you to know they could touch you. I needed to see him up close, not in a boardroom where I was constrained by protocol, but in the wild. I needed to see how he moved when he thought he was winning. Lila had been begging for a double date. She wanted to show him off to Evan, my partner of 6 years. Evan was an architect, quiet, thoughtful, and constitutionally incapable of deception. He was the anchor that kept me from drifting away into the high-pressure stratosphere of my job. I asked him to come, framing it as a peace offering to Lila. We met at the Osprey, a seafood restaurant on the waterfront that charged $40 for an appetizer. Lila and Derek were already seated when we arrived. Derek stood up immediately, smoothing his jacket. Anna, he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, dry, and warm. I am so glad we could do this. I feel we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I shook his hand, looking for a tremor, a sweat, anything. There was nothing, just supreme confidence. This is Evan, I said. Derek turned his charm on Evan like a spotlight. Evan, Lila talks about you constantly. The architect, right? I saw your design for the new library in Portland. Exceptional use of natural light, really transformative for the Civic Center. Evan, who usually shrank away from praise, looked surprised and pleased. Oh, thank you. I didn't think anyone outside the industry followed that project. I like to keep my eye on people who build things that last, Derek said, winking at Lila. We sat down. Lila was beaming. She had her hand on Derek's arm, claiming him. She looked radiant, but there was a frantic edge to her happiness, a desperate need for me to approve of this tableau she had assembled. For the first hour, Derek was perfect. He asked Evan about structural engineering. He asked me about my hobbies, hiking, reading, and listened with an intensity that felt flattering until you realized it was an interrogation technique. He didn't talk about himself unless asked, and even then, he kept it vague: consulting, strategy, optimizing synergies, the kind of corporate speak that meant everything and nothing. But once the wine arrived, a bottle that cost more than my first car, which Derek ordered without looking at the price, the conversation pivoted. "So, Anna," Derek said, swirling his glass, "Lila tells me things are getting intense at North Glass. Activist investors are a nightmare. I consulted for a firm in Chicago that went through a similar hostile action. It can get ugly. It is manageable," I said tightly. "We have a strong governance structure." "Of course," Derek said, "but governance is only as strong as the voting blocks, isn't it?" I have always been fascinated by the psychology of the boardroom. You have the old guard, the risk-averse legacy members, and then you have the new blood. How do you keep them aligned? It must be exhausting herding cats with that much net worth. I put my fork down. I do not discuss board dynamics outside the office. "Derek," he held up his hands in mock surrender. "My apologies. Occupational hazard. I just admire how you handle the pressure. Lila says you have always been the one who holds everything together, the pillar. It must be lonely at the top. Though, you have to wonder who is really loyal to you and who is just waiting for the stock price to dip so they can cash out." He was smiling, but his eyes were drilling into me. He wasn't making conversation. He was fishing for my insecurities. He was telling me he knew about the cracks in my alliances. "Derek," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant, "let's set a boundary. No company talk. Tonight is about family." The table went silent. Lila looked stricken. She kicked me under the table. Hard. Derek's expression didn't change, but the temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. "You are right," he said softly. "I am sorry. Anna, I did not mean to pry. I am in awe of what you have built. Sometimes my curiosity gets the better of me. Please, forgive me." He reached out and squeezed Lila's hand. "I just want to understand the world that shaped this incredible woman next to me." He had flipped it, in 2 sentences. He had made me the aggressor. I was the rude, paranoid sister snapping at the polite, interested future brother-in-law. Lila glared at me. "Why do you have to be so intense?" "Anna? He is just making conversation. It is fine, sweetie." Derek soothed her. "She is under a lot of stress. I understand completely." I felt Evan's hand on my knee, a gentle squeeze of support, but I felt sick. I was sitting across from a man who had breached my company's security 24 hours ago, and he was making me feel like I was the one ruining dinner. The next morning, the ground shifted again. Mara Ellington called me into her office at 7 in the morning. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her laptop was open to a blog I had never heard of, The Silicon Whisperer. It was an anonymous industry gossip site, usually full of unverified rumors about startup failures and CEO affairs. "Read this," Mara said. I leaned over. The headline read, "North Glass Stumbles. Is Project Helios facing a sunset before dawn?" I scanned the text. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. The post detailed specific delays in our flagship platform rollout. It mentioned technical bottlenecks in the data architecture that we had only identified in a closed executive session 3 days ago. But it was the phrasing that stopped my breath. The post used the phrase, "latency in the neural bridge." That wasn't standard industry terminology. That was a specific metaphor our CTO, Marcus, had used in the internal memo, a memo that had only been circulated to the C-suite and the board. "This is a direct leak," I whispered. "It is worse than a leak," Mara said. "It is a signal. Someone is telling the market that we are incompetent before we even launch. The stock is down 4% in pre-market trading." "Who has seen the memo?" I asked. "The board," Mara said, "and their assistants." I thought of the spoofed email. I thought of Derek Vance standing in the boardroom. "Mara," I said, "I think Derek might be—" "Do not," Mara interrupted me. "Do not say it unless you have proof. Anna, Because if you tell me your sister's fiancé is stealing corporate secrets, I have to open a formal investigation that will include you. I have to lock you out of the system until it is cleared. Is that what you want? I stared at her. I was the chair, and I was being threatened with a lockout. No, I said, I will get you proof. I went back to my office and closed the door. I needed to think like him. If he wasn't hacking the servers directly, how was he getting the information? He didn't have a badge anymore. He didn't have access, unless he had a listening device. I thought of Lila. I thought of how much time she spent with him. I thought of how much she shared. I opened Instagram on my computer. Lila's profile was public. She was an aspiring lifestyle influencer, which meant she documented everything: her breakfast, her outfits, her moods. I started scrolling back through the last 2 weeks. Post 1. Lila holding a latte, smiling. Caption: fueling up for a big day of planning. Post 2. A boomerang of clinking champagne glasses. Derek's hand was visible, wearing a distinctive watch. Post 3. A selfie of Lila in an elevator, visiting my big sis at the ivory tower. I clicked on that one. She had visited me for lunch last week. I remembered it. She had come up to the 42nd floor. We had ordered salads. I zoomed in on the photo. Lila was pouting at the camera, wearing mirrored sunglasses. I leaned closer to the screen, in the reflection of her sunglasses. You could see my office behind her. You could see my whiteboard, and on the whiteboard, written in red marker, were the dates for the Helios rollout. I scrolled further. Post 4. Lila sitting at a desk in what looked like a home office. Caption: Derek working late, so I am helping him organize. Power couple. On the desk, next to her laptop, was a stack of papers. They were blurry, but the letterhead was visible. It wasn't Asterly Consulting. It was a contract with a header that looked like a non-disclosure agreement. And then, a video story from 2 days ago. Lila was filming a day in the life. She walked through their apartment, in the background. On a computer monitor that Derek had evidently stepped away from was a calendar. I paused the video. I took a screenshot. I enhanced it. It was my calendar. It was a mirror of my Outlook schedule. He had synced it. How? I remembered a month ago. Lila had asked to borrow my phone to check a reservation because hers was dead. She had it for 10 minutes. He was using her. He was using her obsession with sharing to turn her into a surveillance drone. Every time she posted, she was potentially leaking data. Every time she visited me, she was a Trojan horse. I called Lila. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Briarhaven and Mapleton. I didn't want to do this at the house. I needed neutral ground. Lila arrived looking defensive. She wore a heavy coat and refused to take her sunglasses off inside. If this is about dinner, she said, sitting down, I do not want to hear it. You were rude. Anna, Derek was just trying to bond with you. It is not about dinner, I said. Lila, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I think Derek is using you to get information about Northglass. Lila laughed. A harsh, barking sound. Oh my God. Here we go. The spy novel again. Anna, are you having a breakdown? Seriously, you sound unhinged. I pulled out my tablet. I showed her the screenshot of the sunglasses. I showed her the calendar on the monitor. Look, I said, pointing to the screen. That is my schedule. Lila, why does Derek have my work schedule on his computer? Lila glanced at it and shrugged. He helps me organize the family events. Anna, he probably just wanted to know when you were free so we could plan the engagement party. He is thoughtful like that. He is not thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice low. He is mining you for data. Lila, look at the reflection. You posted confidential dates on Instagram. Did he tell you to take that picture? He likes it when I post content about my life, she said, her voice wavering slightly. He says it builds my brand. He helps me edit the photos. He says I have a great eye. He is editing the photos? I asked. Lila, does he zoom in? Does he tell you where to stand? He is a director, Lila snapped. He understands visuals. Why do you have to twist everything into something ugly? Because he works for a competitor, I hissed. Or he is selling info to one. He does not, Lila shouted. People turned to look at us. She lowered her voice, trembling. He loves me, Anna. He makes me feel safe. For the first time in my life, I do not feel like the screw-up. I do not feel like Anna's little sister. I feel like a partner. He respects me. He is manipulating you. I said gently. No, she said, tears streaming down her face behind the dark glasses. You are manipulating me. You are trying to take the one good thing I have because you are miserable. You are alone. Anna, you have Evan, but you are married to that company. You do not understand what passion looks like. She stood up. I am not going to let you ruin this. She walked out. I watched her go, feeling a terrible, hollow ache in my chest. She was right about one thing. I was married to the company, and right now, that marriage was failing. 2 days later, the report from the private investigator landed on my desk. It was a thick manila envelope, no digital copies. I opened it. The summary was on top. Subject: Derek Vance. Real name: Derek Vanzetti. Findings: 1. Education: University of Arizona. Dropped out sophomore year. No Ivy League record. 2. Employment: terminated from a mid-level sales role at a pharmaceutical company 4 years ago for falsifying expense reports. 3. Business ties: Asterly Consulting is a shell. The bank account associated with Asterly receives monthly wire transfers from an entity called Blue Ridge Analytics. 4. The connection: Blue Ridge Analytics is a wholly owned subsidiary of Velmont Dynamics. I stared at the paper. Velmont Dynamics, our main competitor, the company in San Salado that was currently trying to crush us. Derek wasn't just a grifter. He was a corporate operative. He was on the payroll of our enemy. He was being paid to sleep with my sister, infiltrate my family, and dismantle my company from the inside. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost made me dizzy. I had the smoking gun. Now I just needed to figure out how to use it without blowing up my sister's life, or mine. But before I could decide on a move, the next blow landed. The governance committee meeting was supposed to be routine. We were approving the minutes from the last quarter. Gordon Price sat at the head of the table. He was 60, silver-haired, and had the kind of authority that came from old money. He had been skeptical of me since I took the chair. Anna, he said, not looking up from his papers, before we adjourn, there is a matter of compliance we need to address. I stiffened. Yes. Gordon? There has been some chatter, he said, regarding a conflict of interest. I have disclosed all my investments. I said automatically, this is not about investments, Gordon said. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me. It has come to the committee's attention that your immediate family, specifically your sister, is engaged to an individual with significant financial ties to Velmont Dynamics. The room went dead silent. The other 3 committee members looked at their hands. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who told you that? It does not matter who told us, Gordon said. What matters is that you did not disclose it. You are the chair of Northglass. Your sister is marrying a man who appears to be an agent for our direct competitor, and this man has been seen in our building, in our boardroom, and allegedly has access to internal documents. That is being investigated. I said, my voice shaking, and I did not know about the connection until, ignorance is not a defense for the chair. Gordon slammed his hand on the table. It is your job to know. It is your job to insulate this board from exposure. Right now, you look compromised. Anna, you look like a security risk. I am not compromised. I said, standing up, my loyalty is to this company. Then prove it, Gordon said coldly. Recuse yourself from the vote on the acquisition defense strategy. Step back until this family matter is resolved, if I recuse myself. I said, realizing the trap. The defensive measures will fail. You will have the votes to sell the company. That is a business decision, Gordon said. This is an ethical one. If you do not step back, I will be forced to bring a formal motion of no confidence to the full board, and I will cite your sister's relationship as the primary cause. Do you want that in the press? Chair's sister betting the enemy? I stared at him. He had me. If I fought him, he would leak the story and humiliate Lila, and destroy my reputation. If I stepped back, he would hand the company over to the highest bidder, likely Velmont. I will take it under advisement, I said, and walked out of the room before he could see me tremble. I went straight to Sonia. I showed her the PI report. I told her about Gordon's ultimatum. It is a pincer movement, Sonia said, pacing her office. Derek creates the chaos, the leaks, the security breach. He destabilizes your image. Then Gordon uses that instability to argue that you are unfit to lead. They are working together. Anna. Or at least, Gordon is using Derek's mess to get what he wants. Can we fire Derek? I asked. Can we ban him? We can ban him from the building, Sonia said, but we can't ban him from your sister's life, and as long as he is in her life, the perception of conflict remains. Perception is reality in governance. Anna, even if you are innocent, you look dirty. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lila. I know we fought, but I have news. We picked a date. I stared at the screen. When? I typed back. Next month, she replied. Derek says why wait? True love shouldn't wait. We are getting married in 4 weeks. I dropped the phone on my desk. 4 weeks. The vote on the acquisition defense was in 5 weeks, if Lila married him before the vote. Derek would legally be my brother-in-law. The conflict of interest would be codified in law. I would have to recuse myself. The urgency wasn't romantic. It wasn't because they were in love. It was the timeline of the hostile takeover. Derek was marrying my sister on a schedule dictated by an MA calendar. I looked out the window at the gray sky over Briarhaven. The rain had started again. I had been playing defense. I had been trying to be the responsible one, the polite one, the one who followed the rules. But you can't use rules to fight people who burn the rulebook. Lila was walking into a trap, and she was dragging me and my life's work with her. I picked up the PI report. Derek Vanzetti. I had to destroy him, and to do that, I might have to break my sister's heart myself, before he could do something far worse. The digital forensics lab in the basement of North Glass Systems was a windowless box that smelled of ozone and stale coffee. It was a place where secrets went to be dissected, and tonight, the secret on the table was how my own identity had been weaponized. Sonia Cade stood next to the lead security engineer, a young man named Kevin who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. On the screen in front of us was a log of access times for the secure board portal, the digital vault where we kept our acquisition strategies, our financial projections, and the personnel files of the executive team. Here is the anomaly, Kevin said, pointing to a string of text. Last Tuesday at 3 a.m, and again on Thursday at 4:30, someone accessed the confidential minutes from the governance committee. Whose login was it? I asked. Kevin hesitated. It was authorized under the credentials of Chloe Miller. I blinked. Chloe? My junior executive assistant? The 22-year-old who brought me green tea and organized my travel? Chloe didn't care about governance minutes. She cared about getting her tasks done so she could leave by 5:30. Bring her in, I said. Now. 10 minutes later, Chloe was sitting in the chair opposite me, twisting a tissue in her hands. Her eyes were red. She looked terrified. I didn't do it, Ms. Simmons, she whispered. I swear. I don't even know how to find those documents. My access level shouldn't even let me see them. Chloe, Sonia said, her voice gentle but firm. The logs don't lie. Your username and password were used to download 3 gigabytes of sensitive data in the middle of the night. If you shared your password with anyone, you need to tell us. Now. I didn't, Chloe cried. I am so careful. I use the 2-factor app. I never write it down. I watched her face. She wasn't lying. She was confused. Chloe. I said, think back. Did you receive any unusual emails last week? Anything from IT? Anything from HR? She shook her head. No, just the usual stuff. Expense approvals. Scheduling. Oh, and the verification request from you. The room went dead silent. From me? I asked. Yes, Chloe said. You sent me an email on Monday. It said it was updating the security certificates for the executive team and that I needed to verify my device to keep my calendar synced with yours. It had a link. I clicked it, logged in, and it said, "Verification complete." I never sent that email. I said. Kevin typed furiously on his keyboard. He pulled up the email logs. There it was. An email that appeared to be from anna.simmons@northglass.com. But when Kevin expanded the header, the truth unspooled. It was a spoof, a perfect replica of my signature, my tone, even the font I used. It was a phishing attack, Kevin said. A spear phishing attack. They didn't target the system. They targeted the human. They used your authority, Anna, to trick your assistant into handing over the keys. I looked at the screen. The email read, "Chloe, please handle this immediately. I cannot afford any calendar sync issues this week. Thanks, Anna." It sounded exactly like me. Impatient, focused. They studied me. I realized, whoever wrote this knows how I talk to my staff. Sonia put a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Go home. Chloe, we will deal with this. Do not speak to anyone." When she was gone, Sonia turned to me. "This isn't just hacking, Anna. This is intimacy. Someone is watching you closely enough to mimic you." I drove home that night feeling like there were eyes on the back of my neck. My sanctuary, the loft apartment I shared with Evan, usually felt like the one place where I could unclench my jaw. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw a sleek black sedan parked behind Evan's Volvo. My stomach turned over. I knew that car. I walked inside to find the living room transformed into a performance space. Lila was sitting on the sofa, holding a glass of champagne. Evan was standing by the fireplace, looking polite but strained, and Derek Vance was standing in the center of the room, holding a large, ribbon-wrapped box. "Anna," Lila squealed, "you are finally home. We wanted to surprise you." Derek turned. His smile was dazzling, warm, and utterly terrifying because I knew what lay beneath it. "Hello, Anna," he said. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. We just picked up something for the family, and we couldn't wait to share it." He gestured to the box on the coffee table. "Open it," Lila urged. "It is from both of us. A thank you for being so welcoming." I walked over, my movements stiff. I pulled the ribbon. Inside was a case of vintage wine. Chateau Margaux, a specific vintage, 96. Derek said softly, "Lila mentioned it was the year your mother passed. I thought it would be a nice way to honor her at the wedding. We want to serve it at the head table." I stared at the bottles. It was a monstrous gesture. He was taking the most painful year of my life, the year my world collapsed and I had to become a mother to my sister, and he was packaging it as a wedding accessory. It was a power move. He was telling me, "I know your history. I own your memories now." "It is generous," I said, my voice tight. "And that is not all," Lila said, clapping her hands. "Derek had the best idea. Since you are the organized one, and since you have such amazing taste, we want you to be the planner of honor, not just a bridesmaid. We want you to help us make the decisions, the venue, the menu, everything." Derek stepped closer, invading my personal space just enough to be uncomfortable. "We need your approval." "Anna," he said, "Lila looks up to you so much. Nothing would feel right unless you signed off on it. We want you involved in every detail." He was putting a leash on me. If I was the planner of honor, I would be forced to spend hours with him. I would be forced to approve his choices. I would be tied to the wedding publicly. If I tried to expose him later, I would look like a hypocrite who helped plan the very event I was sabotaging. "I have a very busy month at work," I said, stepping back. "We know," Derek said soothingly. "But family comes first, right? That is what you always tell Lila." He held my gaze. His eyes were flat. Dead things. Checkmate. They said. I looked at Evan. He was watching me, waiting for me to be gracious. He didn't see the knife. He just saw the gift. "I will do what I can." I said. After they left, the silence in the apartment was loud. The case of wine sat on the table like an unexploded bomb. Evan was cleaning up the champagne glasses. That was nice of them, he said. A bit extravagant, but nice. Derek really seems to be trying. Anna? Trying to what? I snapped. Trying to buy me? Trying to psychologically dissect me? Evan sighed and put the glass down on the counter with a clatter. Okay, here we go. Anna, you have to stop. Stop what? Stop looking for the villain, he said. I know you are under pressure at the board. I know the acquisition is a nightmare, but you are projecting it onto them. Derek is a little slick. Sure, he is a sales guy, but he is making your sister happy. Did you see her tonight? She was glowing. She is glowing because she is delusional. I shouted. Evan, he spoofed my email. He hacked the board portal. You have proof of that? Evan asked quietly. Hard proof? Or do you just have a feeling? I have connections, I said, faltering. The PI report was circumstantial. The email spoof was technically anonymous. Evan shook his head. You are becoming paranoid. Anna, you are seeing conspiracies because you are terrified of losing control. You have spent your whole life managing Lila, and now that someone else is doing it, you can't handle it. I stared at him. This was the man who knew me better than anyone, and Derek had managed to turn him too. Not with money, but with the simple weapon of normalcy. Derek acted like a normal fiancé, which made me look like the crazy, overprotective sister. You are wrong, I said, my voice trembling. And when the truth comes out, I hope you remember this conversation. I walked into the bedroom and slammed the door. I regretted it instantly. I was pushing Evan away. I was isolating myself, which was exactly what Derek wanted. The next morning, the corporate vice tightened. Mara Ellington called me on the encrypted line. We have a problem with Holloway Capital, she said. Her voice was grim. Holloway was our largest institutional investor. They held 15% of the stock. What kind of problem? I asked. They are pushing for an accelerated vote, Mara said. They sent a letter to the board this morning. They want us to consider a strategic partnership with a firm called Ironclad Solutions. I have never heard of Ironclad. I said, neither had I. Mara said, so I dug. On paper. They are a neutral infrastructure provider, but their funding structure is opaque. I had our analysts run the shell companies. Anna. Ironclad is backed by a venture fund that shares 3 board members with Velmont Dynamics. I closed my eyes. It was a Trojan horse. If we partner with Ironclad, I said, Velmont gets access to our back end. They get our data. They get our IP. It is an acquisition by stealth. Exactly, Mara said. And Holloway is threatening to withhold their proxy votes for the annual meeting if we don't entertain the offer. They are saying we are stagnant and need external synergies. Who is the contact at Holloway? I asked. A guy named Silas Thorne, Mara said. But here's the kicker. Thorne has been seen having lunch with Gordon Price. Gordon, of course. Anna, Mara said. If they call for a vote next week, we might lose. We need every vote we can get. We need stability. You have to keep your side of the street clean. No more drama with the family. If you look weak, Holloway will pounce. I hung up. The timeline was compressing. The wedding, the vote, the partnership. It was all converging on the same horizon line. I had promised Lila I would come to her final dress fitting. It was the last place I wanted to be. A boutique filled with white lace and whispered dreams. But I needed to keep the peace. I needed to buy time. I arrived 10 minutes late. The shop was busy. I saw Lila standing on the pedestal in front of the mirrors, wearing a gown that cost more than my car. She looked breathtaking, and she looked fragile. Derek wasn't inside. I asked the consultant where the groom was. Oh, he stepped out to take a call, she said. He said it was urgent business. I felt the familiar prickle of suspicion. I walked back toward the entrance. The boutique had a side door that opened onto a quiet alleyway where the staff took smoke breaks. I pushed the door open just a crack. Derek was standing near his car, pacing. He was on his phone. His voice was low, but the alley trapped the sound. I am telling you, it is handled, he said. He sounded annoyed. Not the smooth, charming Derek. The real Derek. No, she is soft. She talks a big game, but she is terrified of being alone. I have her right where I need her. Yes, the vote is the trigger. Once her vote flips, it's done. We liquidate the position and move on. I froze. Once her vote flips, he wasn't talking about Lila. He was talking about me. Or he was talking about using Lila to get to me. Yeah, well, the sister is a problem. He said, she is digging. I might need to accelerate the contingency plan. Just have the paperwork ready. He hung up. I pushed the door open and stepped out. Derek, I said. He spun around. For a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw a look of pure, unadulterated malice on his face. A look that said, I will end you. Then, the mask slid back into place. Anna, he said, smiling. You scared me. I was just dealing with the caterer. You know how they are, always trying to upsell. I walked right up to him. I heard you. Derek, I heard you say, once her vote flips. I heard you say, liquidate the position. You weren't talking to a caterer. You were talking to Velmont. Or Holloway. Derek laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. You really are obsessed, aren't you? I was talking to my broker. Anna, I am liquidating some assets to pay for the honeymoon. And the vote? We were talking about the venue choice. Lila is undecided between the vineyard and the coast. I need her vote to flip so we can book it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You need to relax. Anna, you sound crazy. And if you go back in there and upset Lila with this conspiracy nonsense, I will never forgive you. This is her moment. Do not ruin it. He walked past me, brushing my shoulder. I stood in the alley, shaking. Venue deposit. It was such a plausible lie. It was exactly the kind of thing Lila would believe. I didn't go back inside. I couldn't watch him look at her with those dead eyes. I went to my office. I needed to tear down the legend of Derek Vance once and for all. I pulled up the resume he had submitted to the wedding planner for the couple's website. It listed his achievements. Led strategy for Project Alpha. Scaled revenue by 200%. Keynote speaker at Tech Summit 2024. I ran the text through a plagiarism checker. It lit up like a Christmas tree. The entire summary was lifted verbatim from a template on a site called XQ Brand. It was a filler text for a sample profile. I looked at the recommendations on his LinkedIn. There were 12 of them, all glowing. Derek is a visionary. Derek sees around corners. I clicked on the profiles of the people who wrote them. They looked real. A VP of sales in Denver, a director of marketing in Austin, but when I ran their profile photos through a reverse image search, the truth collapsed. The VP of sales was a stock photo model. The director of marketing was a generated face from an AI database. The entire network was a bot farm. It was a digital Potemkin village designed to fool a background check that didn't dig deep enough. I printed it all out. The template resume, the fake profiles, the IP addresses linking back to a server farm in Russia. This wasn't just a lie, it was a production. I drove to Lila's apartment the next day. I knew Derek was at a golf outing, which I assumed meant a strategy meeting with Holloway. Lila opened the door. She looked tired. There were circles under her eyes. Anna, she said, if you are here to fight about the venue, I am not. I said. I walked in and put the folder on the table. Lila, please, just look. Lila sighed and sat down. She opened the folder. She looked at the resume comparison. She looked at the fake profiles. I watched her face. I expected shock. I expected denial. Instead, she just closed the folder. I know, she said softly. The world stopped spinning. You know? I whispered. You know his references are fake? You know he isn't an executive at a giant? Lila looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a defiant sadness. I knew he exaggerated. Anna, I knew he wasn't. Exactly who he said he was on the first night. I looked him up too. You know, I am not an idiot. Then why? I asked, my voice rising. Why are you marrying him? He is a fraud. Lila, he is lying to you every single day. Because he treats me like I matter, Lila shouted. She stood up, knocking the chair back. So what if he isn't a CEO? So what if he is a consultant or a contractor or whatever? He listens to me. He plans a future with me. He doesn't look at me with pity like you do. He doesn't treat me like a charity case. He is using you, I screamed. He is using you to get to Northglass. He doesn't care about your stupid company, Lila screamed back. Not everything is about you. Anna, he loves me. Maybe he faked his resume to impress you. Maybe he lied because he knew you would judge him if he wasn't perfect. But with me, he is real. She was crying now. Ugly, gasping sobs. Please, Anna, please don't ruin this. It is the only future I have ever felt good about. If you expose him, if you humiliate him, he will leave, and I will be alone again, and I can't be alone, not again. I looked at my sister. I saw the depth of her damage. She would rather live in a beautiful lie than face a lonely truth. I can't let you marry him. Lila, I said, he is dangerous. Then you will lose me, she said. If you do this, Anna, if you destroy him, I will never speak to you again. I needed a compromise. I needed to stall. I invited Derek to lunch. Just the two of us. We met at a steakhouse downtown. He ordered the most expensive cut. Rare. Derek, I said, skipping the pleasantries. We need to talk about the timeline. Oh, he said, cutting his meat. I want you to delay the wedding, I said. He paused. The knife scraped against the porcelain plate. A screeching sound. Delay it? Why? Because Lila is overwhelmed, I said, and because I want to give you time to clarify your background. He looked up. His eyes were cold. My background is clear. Anna. It is a template. Derek, I said, and your references are bots. I have the file. I haven't shown it to the board yet. I haven't shown it to the press, but I will. He stopped eating. He put the knife down. For a moment, the mask dropped completely. His face contorted into a sneer of pure contempt. It was the face of a man who hated me, not just disliked me, hated me. You think you are so smart, he hissed. You sitting in your glass tower, thinking you can dictate terms. You have no idea what is coming. Anna, you have no idea how small you really are. Then, just as quickly, he blinked. The charm returned, a terrifying, fluid switch. But, he said, smiling, if a delay will make you feel more comfortable, perhaps we can discuss it. Lila wants a winter wedding anyway. We could push it to December. I breathed out. He was blinking. I had leverage. But, he added, taking a sip of wine, in exchange, I would expect you to be more supportive of the new partnership opportunities coming up for Northglass. I hear Ironclad is a great option. It would be a shame if family tension got in the way of good business. He was negotiating. He was trading the wedding date for my vote. I will consider it. I said, excellent, Derek said. Now, try the calamari. It is fantastic. I left the lunch feeling dirty. I had entered into a transaction with a predator, but I had bought time, or so I thought. I went back to the office. It was late. The cleaners were vacuuming the hallways. I went to my desk. I needed to draft a memo to the governance committee, explaining the delay in the wedding, hoping it would ease the pressure from Gordon. But when I opened my drawer to get a notepad, I found a document that wasn't there before. It was a draft. It was stamped confidential, draft for review. It wasn't a Northglass document. The letterhead belonged to a crisis PR firm called Vector Strategy. I read the title, Formal Complaint, regarding the conduct of Board Chair Anna Simmons. I started reading. My hands began to shake. Ms. Simmons has shown signs of significant stress that may be affecting her judgment and workplace interactions. Several accounts describe increasing boundary issues and escalating conflicts. Recent incidents at family-related events and repeated contact with third parties raise concerns about her ability to maintain appropriate professional conduct at this time. We recommend she take an immediate leave of absence while the situation is reviewed and appropriate support options are considered. It detailed everything. The paranoia about the badge, the outburst at the dinner, the harassment of Derek. It twisted every attempt I had made to protect the company into a symptom of madness. And at the bottom, there was a space for a signature. It wasn't signed by Derek. It was prepared for the signature of Evan Reese. The document claimed my own partner was the source of the concern. I stared at the paper. They weren't just going to fire me. They were going to gaslight the entire world into thinking I had lost my mind, and they were going to use the man I loved to do it. I was sitting in the dark, holding the script of my own destruction, realizing that while I was playing a game of facts, they were writing a tragedy, and I was the character who was about to be written out. The phone on my desk rang at 7 a.m. It was not the internal line, it was the external line, the one that bypassed the executive assistants only if you had the direct number. Very few people had that number. I picked it up, expecting Sonia or perhaps Mara. Ms. Simmons? A man's voice. Unfamiliar, raspy, like he had been up all night drinking coffee. Speaking. I said, "Who is this?" "This is David Rourke. I am a reporter with the Briarhaven Ledger." My hand tightened on the receiver. The Ledger was the local paper of record, usually concerned with zoning laws and school board elections, but they had a business section that punched above its weight. "I am calling to get a comment on a story we are preparing to run on Sunday." Rourke said. His tone was professional, courteous, and lethal. "It concerns the current leadership stability at North Glass Systems." I stared out the window at the gray skyline. There is no story. "Mr. Rourke, North Glass is posting record quarterly earnings. That is not the angle." Rourke said, "We have received information from multiple sources regarding internal turmoil on the board, specifically, allegations that the chair, that would be you, is currently embroiled in a personal family scandal that is impacting fiduciary governance. We have heard terms like emotional compromise and conflict of interest involving a competitor." He paused, letting the words hang there like smoke. "We also have a source suggesting that a formal complaint is being drafted by concerned shareholders, asking for your temporary recusal due to health reasons. Do you have a comment on these allegations?" The room seemed to tilt. They weren't just whispering anymore. They had gone to the press. The draft I had found in my drawer, the one with the fake psychiatric concerns, had been leaked. Or at least the bullet points had. "Mr. Rourke," I said, my voice steady, "if you print rumors started by short sellers and corporate saboteurs, you will be hearing from our legal counsel. This is a coordinated smear campaign. So you are denying that your sister's fiancé has ties to Velmont Dynamics?" Rourke asked. He had done his homework. I cannot comment on personnel matters or private family business." I said, "That is a no comment then." Rourke said, "We are running the piece on Sunday. Ms. Simmons, just thought you should know." I hung up. Sunday. I had 3 days before the world officially decided I was unstable. I walked down the hall to Sonia's office. I didn't knock. I walked in and closed the door. They called the Ledger. I said. Sonia looked up from her computer. Her face was pale. "I know. Legal just got a ping from their general counsel asking for a fact check on your tenure dates. They are locking the story. Who is paying for this?" "Sonia?" I asked. "Who is paying Vector Strategy? The PR firm that wrote the draft?" Sonia turned her monitor around. "I spent all night following the money. Vector Strategy is a boutique firm in DRC. They don't have a public client list, but their billing goes through a holding company called Apex Horizons. And Apex Horizons is a pass-through entity," Sonia said. "It has no employees, but its registered agent is the same law firm that handles special purpose vehicles for Holloway Capital." I sat down heavily in the chair. "Holloway. It is not just Derek." I said. "No," Sonia said. "It is a pincer movement. Holloway wants the acquisition. They want to sell North Glass to Velmont, or strip it for parts. But they can't do it while you are chair because you are blocking the vote. They need you gone. So they are using Derek to create the chaos, and then they are using the chaos to justify removing you. It is an influence operation." I said, "It is regime change." Sonia nodded. "And right now, they are winning. If that story runs on Sunday, the stock will tank on Monday. The board will panic. Gordon Price will call for an emergency vote to replace you for the good of the company. You will be out by Tuesday. I need to stop the story." I said, "You can't stop the press." "Anna," Sonia said, The only way to kill a story like this is to give them a bigger one. You have to prove it is a setup, and you have to do it before Sunday. I needed allies. I couldn't trust the full board. Half of them were terrified of the stock drop, and the other half were listening to Gordon Price's whispers about my mental state. I texted Elise Marrow and Kenji Holt. Elise was the longest-serving board member, a woman who had known my father. She was the moral conscience of Northglass. Kenji was the tech visionary, a guy who had built 3 companies before 30. He hated politics, but he hated incompetence more. I asked them to meet me at a small, private library in the University District, a place where no one from the financial sector would ever be caught dead. They were waiting for me in a study room I had reserved. The rain was lashing against the Gothic windows. "Thank you for coming," I said, placing my briefcase on the table. "This better be good." "Anna," Kenji said. He was wearing a hoodie, looking restless. "Gordon is calling everyone. He says you're having a breakdown. He says you threatened a vendor in an alleyway." "I didn't threaten anyone," I said. I was confronting a corporate spy. I opened my briefcase. I laid it all out. The log of the spoofed email that tricked my assistant. The PI report on Derek's fake resume and the bot farm recommendations. The chain of shell companies linking Derek's consulting firm to Velmont. The financial trail connecting the PR smear campaign to Holloway Capital. And finally, the draft complaint I had found in my drawer. Elise picked up the draft. She put on her reading glasses. Her hand trembled slightly as she read the paragraph about my emotional instability. "This is vile," she whispered. "They are weaponizing your stress against you." "It is worse than vile," Kenji said, looking at the network logs. "It is criminal. This spoofing? That is wire fraud. And this connection to Holloway? That is market manipulation. So you believe me?" I asked. "I believe you," Elise said, taking off her glasses. "I have known you since you were 12. Anna, you are the sanest person I know. But believing you isn't enough. Why not?" I pointed to the papers. "It is all here. It is circumstantial," Elise said. "A spoofed email is hard to attribute to a specific person in court. The shell companies are designed to be deniable. If you go public with this, Holloway will sue you for libel. They will say you are weaving conspiracy theories to save your job. They will spin it as more proof of your paranoia. We need a smoking gun," Kenji said. He was tapping his pen against the table. A frantic rhythm. "We need to catch him in the act. We need to catch him handing Northglass property to the enemy." "How?" I asked. "He doesn't have access anymore. We locked the system. He has access through your sister," Kenji said. "You said he has her checking your calendar. You said he is in her head." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "We set a trap. A barium meal?" "A what?" Elise asked. "It is a counterintelligence tactic," Kenji said. "We create a fake document, something juicy, something that looks like a game changer for the company. We watermark it digitally, invisible to the eye, but traceable in the metadata. And we give it to only one person, to Lila," I said. Kenji nodded. "You tell Lila about it. You let her accidentally see it, or you send it to her thinking it is something else. If that document ends up on a blog, or in Holloway's hands, we know exactly where it came from, and because of the unique watermark, we can prove it in court." I felt sick. "You want me to use my sister as bait? She is already bait." "Anna," Kenji said brutally, "they are using her to catch you. You are just reversing the polarity." Elise looked at me with sympathy. "It is cynical. Anna, it is ugly. But if you don't do this, you lose the company, and your sister marries a fraud who will discard her the moment the acquisition is closed." I looked at the rain hitting the glass. I had spent my life trying to protect Lila from the harsh realities of the world. Now, to save us both, I had to feed her a lie. "Do it," I said. "Write the document. We created a fake memorandum. Subject: Project Obsidian. Confidential acquisition strategy." The memo outlined a secret plan for Northglass to acquire a massive AI startup in Berlin. It was fake. The startup didn't exist. The numbers were fabricated. But it looked real. It had the right letterhead, the right financial density, the right tone of urgent confidentiality. Kenji embedded a tracking pixel in the PDF and a unique syntax pattern in the text that would survive copy-pasting. Now I just had to get it to her. I called Lila. She didn't answer. I texted her. "Can we talk? I want to apologize. I have a proposal for the wedding." She called me back within 5 minutes. I went to her apartment. Derek wasn't there. It was mid-afternoon. Lila looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy. She was wearing sweatpants. Curled up on the sofa. The apartment was messy. Unusual for her. Boxes of wedding favors were stacked in the corner, unopened. "I am sorry I yelled at you," I said, sitting on the edge of the coffee table. Lila wiped her nose. "You are always sorry, Anna, and then you do it again." "I know." I said, "I am just under a lot of pressure. The board is trying to push me out." Lila looked up. "Really?" "Yes," I said. I decided to pivot the conversation to the bait, but first, I needed to offer her the escape hatch one last time. "Lila," I said softly, "before we talk about anything else, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Is Derek pressuring you?" Lila looked away. "No. Lila, please. I heard him in the alley. I know he is pushing for something." Lila crumbled. She put her face in her hands. He keeps asking about your vote," she sobbed. "He says that if you don't vote for the partnership with Ironclad, the market will crash. He says his investments are tied to it. He says that if the market crashes, we will lose everything. The house, the wedding, our future. He is lying." I said, "He says he needs me to influence you," Lila said, her voice muffled. "He says that for once in my life, I can be useful, that I can save the family fortune. He says that if I can't do this one small thing, just get you to vote yes, then maybe we aren't compatible. Maybe I am not strategic enough for him." I felt a cold rage burning in my chest. He was holding his love hostage in exchange for a proxy vote. "Lila," I said, "he is blackmailing you emotionally. That is not love. That is leverage." "I know," she cried. "I know it feels wrong. But Anna, I am 30 years old. I have failed at everything I have ever tried. The gallery, the jewelry business, everything. This is the first time I felt like I was winning. I can't lose him. I can't be the girl who got dumped by the successful guy because she was too stupid to help him." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Can't you just vote yes? Just this once? For me?" I took a deep breath. I reached into my purse. I pulled out my checkbook. "Lila," I said, "I will cover everything. The venue deposits, the dress, the cancellation fees. I will pay for you to go to Europe for a month to clear your head. I will help you start a new business. A real one. But you have to walk away. Now. Today." Lila stared at the checkbook. For a second. I saw hope in her eyes. The relief of being saved. Then, she shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I can't. Everyone knows we are engaged. It is on Facebook. It is on Instagram. If I cancel it now, I will look like a fool. I will look like a failure." She pulled her knees to her chest. I would rather be unhappy with him than alone and humiliated without him. The door to her soul closed. She had made her choice. She chose the illusion. Then I have to protect myself. I thought. I stood up. "Okay, Lila, I understand." I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder containing Project Obsidian. "If you are going to marry him," I said, my voice flat, "then you should know that I might not be chair much longer. I am working on a final deal, a big one. If this goes through, I might retire anyway." "What is it?" Lila asked, looking at the folder. "It is a potential acquisition." I said, "Project Obsidian. It is highly confidential. I needed to read it somewhere quiet away from the office. Can I leave it here while I run to the pharmacy? My head is splitting." Lila nodded. "Sure. Put it on the desk." I placed the folder on the desk, right next to Derek's laptop dock. "Don't let anyone see it." I said, "It is the only copy." "I won't," she said. I walked out of the apartment. I felt like Judas. I felt like a monster. But I knew exactly what she would do. She would want to prove to Derek that she was useful. She would want to show him that she had access. She would show him the document to prove she was strategic. And Derek? Derek wouldn't be able to resist. A secret acquisition? That was exactly the kind of intel Holloway would pay millions for. It was the kind of news that would tank the stock if leaked early. I sat in my car around the corner. I called Kenji. The package is delivered. I said, "Now we wait." Kenji said, "The wait was excruciating." 5 hours passed. I sat in my home office, staring at the tracking dashboard Kenji had set up. Nothing. Had I misjudged her? Had she actually respected my confidence? Then, at 8:30 in the evening, the alert sounded, a sharp ping from the laptop. Kenji's voice came over the speakerphone. "We got a hit." "Where?" I asked. "The document was just uploaded to a secure Dropbox." Kenji said, "But here's the beauty of it. The uploader didn't scrub the metadata correctly. They converted the PDF to a Word doc to edit it, then back to PDF. The author tag on the conversion software?" I held my breath. D_Vance_consulting_Maine. Kenji read, "He took the bait." I whispered, "And that is not all." Kenji said, 10 minutes later, a summary of the Project Obsidian leak appeared on the Silicon Whisperer, the same blog that leaked the memo last week. I opened the browser. There it was. Exclusive. Northglass, betting the farm. On Risky Berlin. Startup. The article quoted the fake numbers from my fabricated memo. It painted the move as a desperate Hail Mary by a failing chair. They didn't even verify it. I said, "They were so eager to destroy me they ran with a fake story." "We have him," Kenji said. "We have the chain of custody, Lila to Derek, Derek to the blog, and the metadata proves it came from his machine." I felt a surge of triumph, but it was cold and bitter. I had the proof. I could go to the board tomorrow. I could show them that the leaks were coming from a man who was actively manufacturing fake news to drive down the stock. I could prove the conspiracy. I printed the logs. I saved the screenshots. "I'm going to call Sonia." I said, "We need to prepare the affidavit for the morning." I hung up. I stood up and paced the room. I had won. It was over. Then the doorbell rang. It was late. 9 o'clock. I walked to the door. Checking the peephole. It wasn't Derek. It was a man in a windbreaker. He held a clipboard. "Ms. Anna Simmons?" he asked through the door. "Yes." I opened it a crack. "You have been served," he said. He thrust a thick envelope at me and turned to walk away. I looked at the envelope. It had the seal of the Briarhaven County Superior Court. I tore it open. Temporary restraining order and petition for protection. Plaintiff, Derek Vance. Defendant, Anna Simmons. I scanned the document, my breath hitching in my throat. The defendant has engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment, stalking, and cyberstalking against the plaintiff. The defendant has hired private investigators to illegally access the plaintiff's financial records. The defendant has trespassed at the plaintiff's residence and made verbal threats of physical harm in public. See Exhibit A, witness statement from bridal shop employee. The plaintiff asserts that the defendant is fixated on him and poses an immediate threat to his safety and the safety of his fiancé, Lila Simmons. The court hereby orders the defendant to stay 500 yards away from the plaintiff and his residence. I dropped the papers. He had flipped it. He knew I was digging. He knew about the PI. And instead of waiting for me to expose him, he had gone to a judge and framed my investigation as stalking, a restraining order. If this hit the public record, and it would, I was dead. A board chair with a restraining order against her own future brother-in-law? A chair accused of fixation and harassment? It fit perfectly into the narrative of instability. It was the final nail. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "Stay away from my family. Anna, the police have been notified." He wasn't scared. He was gloating. The next morning, the courthouse hallway smelled of floor wax and despair. I was there with Sonia, who looked grim. We were there to contest the emergency order. But the damage was already done. The ledger had picked up the filing. The headline on the morning edition wasn't about the board turmoil. It was, "North Glass Chair, slapped with restraining order by sister's fiancé." I walked down the marble corridor, my heels clicking loudly. People turned to look. I saw pity in their eyes. I saw judgment. Derek was standing at the other end of the hall. He was with a lawyer, a shark from a high-priced firm that Holloway definitely paid for. Lila was standing next to him. She wouldn't look at me. She was staring at the floor, her hand gripping Derek's arm. She looked small, defeated. Derek looked up. He met my eyes. He didn't smile this time. He just watched me with that flat, heavy gaze. He had taken my sister. He had taken my reputation. He had taken my company. And now, he was using the law to physically banish me from their lives. Sonia leaned in. "We have the evidence of the leak. Anna, we can use it to impeach his credibility. But this is family court. They don't care about corporate espionage. They care about threats. And that incident in the alley? It is your word against his." I looked at Derek. I looked at the man who had turned my life into a weapon against me. This wasn't business anymore. It wasn't about stock prices or board seats or market share. He had declared war on my sanity. I straightened my jacket. I tightened my grip on my briefcase. "Let's go inside," I said to Sonia. Realizing that the rules of the boardroom didn't apply here, in the boardroom, facts mattered. Here, only the story mattered. And right now, he was telling a much better story than I was. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper, a stale, institutional scent that I would forever associate with the feeling of helplessness. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingernails were digging crescents into my palms, beside me. Sonia Cade was arranging her notes with a geometric precision that did nothing to calm the chaos in my chest. Across the aisle, Derek sat with his lawyer. He looked immaculate. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. His posture slumped just enough to suggest weariness, sorrow, and a heavy heart. He didn't look like a corporate shark who had spoofed my email and infiltrated my board. He looked like a man who was tired of being harassed by his crazy sister-in-law. Lila was sitting in the gallery behind him. She was staring at the back of his head, her face pale and unreadable. She hadn't looked at me once since we entered the room. The judge, a stern woman named Sullivan with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, flipped through the file. "Ms. Simmons," Judge Sullivan said, looking over her glasses at me, "I have read the affidavits. Mr. Vance claims that you have hired private investigators to track his financial movements, that you have confronted him in public spaces with aggressive accusations, and that you have repeatedly attempted to interfere with his upcoming marriage. It is not interference, Your Honor," I said, my voice sounding thin in the high-ceilinged room. "It is due diligence. Mr. Vance is marrying my sister, and he has misrepresented his identity and his employment." The judge sighed. "Ms. Simmons, lying on a resume is not a crime that justifies stalking. Is it true that you confronted him in the alley behind a bridal shop?" I confronted him about a conversation I overheard regarding my company. I said, "And did you shout at him?" I raised my voice. I admitted. Derek's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client is terrified. Ms. Simmons is the chair of a major corporation, and she has seemingly unlimited resources. She has deployed cyber surveillance and physical tails. My client just wants to get married in peace. He is asking for a protective radius so he can attend his own rehearsal dinner without being interrogated." I looked at Derek. He rubbed his eyes. A gesture of pure exhaustion. It was a masterclass in performance. He was the victim. I was the unhinged. Controlling matriarch. "Ms. Simmons," the judge said, turning back to me, "you seem incredibly tense. I am under a great deal of pressure." I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "My company is being targeted." "That is a boardroom matter, not a family court matter," the judge snapped. "Look, I am going to grant a temporary mutual conduct order. Both of you are to stay 100 yards away from each other. No contact, no third-party communication. Ms. Simmons, if you violate this, you will be held in contempt. Do Do you understand? But he is marrying my sister. I protested. How can I? Do you understand? The judge repeated, her voice like a gavel strike. Yes, I whispered. De-escalate, Ms. Simmons, the judge said, closing the file. For everyone's sake, take a step back and focus on your own life. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I had been stripped naked. The injustice of it burned in my throat like acid. I was the one telling the truth. I was the one protecting my family. And the law had just handed the predator a shield, in the parking lot. Sonia walked briskly beside me, her heels clicking on the asphalt. You need to listen to me. Anna, she said, her voice low and urgent. You cannot go near him. You cannot text him. You cannot even look at him wrong. If you violate this order, Derek will use it to force your immediate removal from the board. A chair held in contempt of court is an automatic governance failure. I know, I said, unlocking my car. I have to be invisible. Worse. Sonia said, you have to be perfect. I drove back to the office, but there was no sanctuary there. The atmosphere at North Glass was toxic. The news of the restraining order had circulated instantly. People stopped talking when I walked past the cubicles. They looked down at their phones. I was a pariah. I went into my office and closed the blinds. My inbox was full. The first email was from the board secretary. Urgent. Special session request. I opened it. It was a formal letter from Holloway Capital, signed by their general counsel. To the board of directors of North Glass Systems, in light of the recent public legal challenges facing the chair and the resulting volatility in the stock price, down 12% since Monday, Holloway Capital formally requests an accelerated vote on the strategic partnership with Ironclad Solutions. We believe a swift resolution is necessary to restore stability and market confidence. Restore stability. It was a beautiful euphemism. They were saying, the chair is crazy. The stock is tanking. Give us the company and we will make the pain go away. I pressed the intercom button. Sarah? Get me Gordon Price. Gordon didn't answer. I tried Kenji. He picked up on the first ring. Anna. Kenji said, it is bad. How bad? I asked. Gordon is whipping votes. Kenji said, he is calling everyone. He is telling them that you are a liability. He is using the restraining order as proof that you have lost your judgment. He is saying that we need adult leadership, unclouded by personal drama. He is pitching himself as the interim chair to oversee the Ironclad deal. He is working with them. Kenji. I said, you know that. I know it. Kenji said, but I can't prove it. And right now, the other members are scared. They see their equity dropping every hour. They just want the bleeding to stop. If the vote happens next week, Anna, I think you lose. I stared at the wall. I was fighting a war on two fronts, and I was losing on both. I went home early. I couldn't breathe in the office. Evan was in the kitchen making pasta. The domestic normalcy of it felt jarring, like walking onto a movie set. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something new in his eyes. Guilt. Hey, he said softly. I put my keys on the counter. Hey, Anna, he said, putting the spoon down. I need to tell you something. I should have told you yesterday, but I didn't want to add to the stress. What? I asked, bracing myself. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and slid it across the island. Read the email at the top. I picked it up. It was from an anonymous sender. Concerned_friend_88. Subject, Anna's well-being. Dear Evan, we have never met, but I work closely with Anna. We are all very worried about her. She has been exhibiting signs of severe paranoia and dissociation at the office. There are rumors of a breakdown. I know she hides it well. But please, for her safety, encourage her to step down and seek treatment. We just want her to get help before she does something she can't undo. I looked up at Evan. He was watching me. They sent this to you? I asked. Yeah, Evan said. And Anna. For a second. When I first read it, I thought it might be real. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. You thought I was crazy. I thought you were breaking. Evan corrected. I thought maybe I was too close to see it. but then I looked at the timestamp. It came in 2 hours after the restraining order was filed. It is too coordinated. He walked around the island and wrapped his arms around me. I am sorry. Anna, I am sorry I doubted you. This isn't just a bad fiancé. This is a hit job. They are trying to isolate you from everyone, even me. I leaned into him, letting the tears I had been holding back soak into his shirt. They are trying to gaslight me. I whispered, they want me to believe I am the problem. We are not going to let them, Evan said, holding me tighter. You are the sanest person I know, and we are going to fight this 5 miles away, in the sleek, modern apartment she shared with Derek. Lila was staring at her laptop screen. The apartment was quiet. Derek was out meeting with the venue coordinator, or so he said. Lila knew better now. He was meeting with whoever he really reported to. She was trying to write her vows. She had been working on them for days, trying to find the words to explain why she loved him. It was harder than she expected. Every time she wrote something, it felt hollow. I love how you take care of me. I love how safe I feel. It all sounded like she was describing a bodyguard, not a husband. She opened the document she had saved yesterday. Lila_vows_draft_3. She started reading, Derek, from the moment I met you, I knew you were the one. You saw me when no one else did. You believed in my art, even when I wanted to give up. She stopped. The cursor jumped. The text was changing. She wasn't typing. She watched, frozen, as the words on the screen were deleted, backspaced into oblivion by a ghost. Then, new words appeared. Derek, from the moment we met, I knew we were a power couple. You saw the potential in us to build a legacy. We are not just partners. We are a force. Lila stared at the screen. A force? She would never say that. She realized what was happening. The document was saved in their shared cloud folder. Derek was editing it. He was editing her vows in real time from wherever he was. She watched as he deleted her line about kindness and replaced it with, I promise to stand by you as we prove everyone wrong. I promise to be the wife who understands what it takes to win. He wasn't writing vows. He was writing a press release. He was writing a script for the perfect corporate wife who would stand next to him while he conquered the world. He didn't care about her art. He didn't care about her kindness. He cared about winning. He cared about proving everyone wrong. Lila felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It wasn't the panic she usually felt. It was clarity. For the first time in years, the fog of insecurity lifted, and she saw the landscape of her life with brutal sharpness. He didn't love her. He was casting her, and she had gotten the role because she was Anna Simmons' sister. She closed the laptop. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the rain. She had spent her whole life trying to be more than Anna's little sister. She wanted to be special. She wanted to be important. Derek had promised her that, but he was only making her important because he could use her to hurt Anna. She wasn't the main character in her own love story. She was the weapon in someone else's war. She picked up her phone. She knew she couldn't call Anna. The lawyers had said no contact, but she also knew that for the first time in her life, she had to stop being the child who needed saving and start being the sister who did the saving. I was sitting on the patio with Evan, drinking tea, when a car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't Lila's car. It was a rideshare. Lila stepped out. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses, looking like a spy from a bad movie. She walked up the driveway, looking over her shoulder. Lila, I said, standing up. You can't be here. The order says you can't come near Derek, Lila said, her voice shaking but determined, and it says you can't contact us. It doesn't say I can't come to visit my sister if he isn't here. She walked up the steps. She looked at me, and I saw that her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. I saw him editing my vows. She said, What? I asked. He was rewriting them. She said, He took out the part where I said I loved his laugh. He put in a line about building a dynasty. She let out a short, bitter laugh. A dynasty. Anna. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment. I motioned for her to sit down. Evan went inside to give us space. I am sorry. Lila. I said, "Don't," she said sharply. "Do not apologize. If you apologize, I will crumble. And I can't crumble right now. I need to be angry." She sat down and wrapped her coat tighter around herself. "I wanted it to be real so bad." She whispered, "I wanted to be the one who won. I wanted to show you that I could have a life that was big and shiny and important, just like yours. I was so tired of being the screw-up. I was so tired of you paying for everything. I never wanted you to feel that way." I said, "I just wanted you to be safe." "I know," Lila said. "You wanted control. You thought if you controlled everything, nothing bad would happen to us. And I thought if I had status, nothing bad would happen to me." She looked at me. "We were both wrong. Your control made you a target, and my status made me a pawn." We sat there in the silence, the rain drumming on the patio roof. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had. We stripped away the roles we had played for 30 years, the responsible one and the wild one. And we were just two women who had been outmaneuvered by a man who knew exactly where to stick the knife. "So what do we do?" Lila asked. "We fight," I said. "But I can't do it alone. I am locked out. Lila, I can't see his files. I can't track him. I am blind." Lila reached into her large tote bag. She pulled out a laptop. "This is his old MacBook," she said. "He thinks he wiped it before he gave it to me to use for wedding planning. But he didn't log out of the cloud drive. He just deleted the shortcuts." She opened it and pushed it toward me. I restored the trash folder. She said, I looked at the screen. There was a folder labeled wedding_logistics. But inside that folder, there was a subfolder labeled project_glass_house. I clicked it. It wasn't wedding plans. It was a war room. There were spreadsheets. I opened one titled board_profile_matrix. It listed every member of the North Glass board. Next to their names were columns: weakness, leverage, vote probability, Gordon Price, leverage, gambling debt in Macau, unverified but usable, strategy, appeal to ego/status, promise interim chair role, Elise Marrow, leverage, none, strategy, neutralize/discredit, frame Anna as unstable to alienate her, Kenji Holt, leverage, none, strategy, ignore, he is a minority vote. I scrolled down. There was a timeline. Phase 1, infiltration, engagement. Phase 2, destabilization, the leaks. Phase 3, the wedge, restraining order. Phase 4, the vote, acquisition. It was all there. He had gamified the destruction of my life. And then, I found the smoking gun, a folder of invoices. They weren't from Asterly Consulting. They were billing records to a company called Holloway Strategic Partners. There were payments for PR crisis management, payments for surveillance, payments for asset acquisition, Lila. Lila saw the entry with her name. She flinched as if she had been slapped. Asset acquisition. She whispered, "That is what I am, an asset." I clicked on a PDF. It was an email chain. Derek was communicating with Silas Thorne at Holloway Capital. Thorne, the timeline is tight. We need Simmons out by the 24th. Derek, the restraining order is the kill shot. Once the judge grants it, Price will move for a vote of no confidence. Make sure the PR team is ready to drop the mental health story the same day. Thorne, don't miss. If she survives the vote, we are exposed. I looked at Lila. We have him. I said, this proves collusion. This proves Holloway is manipulating the board to force a sale. We have to show this to someone. Lila said, we called Mara. She agreed to meet us at her house, far away from the office. I brought Kenji and Elise. We sat in Mara's living room, the laptop connected to her TV. I walked them through the documents, the hit list, the payments, the emails. The room was deadly silent. When I finished, I looked at Mara. This is it, I said. We have enough to fire Derek. We have enough to sue Holloway. We can stop the vote." Mara stared at the screen. She looked old. She looked terrified. "Anna," she said slowly, "this is catastrophic. It is the truth." I said, "It is nuclear." Mara corrected. "If we go public with this, if we accuse our largest investor of a criminal conspiracy to overthrow the board, do you know what happens?" "Justice?" I asked. "Panic." Mara said, "Absolute market panic. The SEC will freeze trading. The stock will go to zero. Our credit lines will be pulled. Competitors will poach our staff. Northglass will die, not because of the acquisition, but because of the scandal." She looked at me with pleading eyes. "You are asking us to burn down the village to save it." "So we do nothing?" Kenji asked. Angry? "We let them win?" "No," Mara said. "We can't let them win. But we can't use this evidence publicly. It is too dangerous." "Then what do we do?" I asked. "We have to win the vote," Mara said. "We have to beat them in the boardroom, by the rules. We have to convince the undecided members to back you without blowing up the company." "But Gordon has the votes," I said. "He has whipped the numbers. If we vote next week, I lose? Then we have to change the numbers," Elise said. "We have to use this intel privately. We have to flip the votes one by one. Quietly. It is a gamble," Kenji said. If we fail, Mara said, "Northglass becomes a subsidiary of Velmont, and Anna is fired in disgrace." Mara looked at her watch. "I'm going to call an emergency board meeting for Tuesday. We will put the ironclad partnership on the agenda. It is a put up or shut up moment." "Tuesday?" I said. "That is 4 days away. Use them well," Mara said, "because that is all the time you have left as chair." I walked Lila to her rideshare. The rain had stopped, leaving the air cold and crisp. "Are you going back to him?" I asked. "I have to," Lila said. "If I leave now, he will know something is wrong. He will check the cloud. He will destroy the evidence. I have to play the part for 4 more days." "Lila, it is dangerous." I said, "I know," she said. She put her hand on my arm. "But I am not doing it for status anymore. Anna, I am doing it for us." She got into the car. I watched her drive away, back to the apartment, back to the man who called her an asset. I went back inside. I looked at the calendar on my phone. Tuesday, the emergency vote. It was the final showdown. Either I retained the chair and blocked the partnership, or I was removed for stability, and Derek and Holloway walked away with everything I had built. I picked up the phone. I called Kenji. "Let's get to work," I said. "We have 4 days to flip 5 votes." The 42nd floor of Northglass Systems had been transformed into a fortress. In my 3 years as chair, I had presided over contentious mergers, budget cuts, and executive firings. But I had never seen the conference center look like this. Security guards in dark suits stood at every elevator bank. A neutral facilitator, a man named Mr. Sterling, who specialized in high-stakes corporate mediation, sat at the head of the table where I usually sat. Legal counsel for the board, for the company, and for individual members lined the back of the room like vultures waiting for a carcass. I walked in with Sonia, Cade, and Lila. Lila was shaking. She wore a simple gray suit, her hands clutching a file folder so tightly her knuckles were white. I had insisted she come. She was my witness, my liability, and my only hope. The room was silent as we entered. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of Briarhaven, gray and weeping with rain, but no one was looking at the view. 12 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I took my seat not at the head of the table, but at the side. Next to Sonia, Gordon Price sat opposite me. He looked grave, the picture of a concerned elder statesman. Next to him sat Maris Holtain, the representative from Holloway Capital. Maris was a woman who looked like she was carved from steel, sharp, cold, and expensive. "Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "We are here for an emergency session of the Board of Directors of Northglass Systems," he said. "The agenda is singular. A motion has been brought regarding the leadership of the chair. Mr. Price, you have the floor." Gordon stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at the other board members with a mournful expression. "This brings me no pleasure," Gordon began. His voice was smooth, practiced. "We all respect Anna. We respect what she has built, but we have a fiduciary duty to this company that supersedes personal loyalty." He placed a stack of papers on the table. "In the last 10 days, our stock has dropped 14%. We are facing a hostile market environment. And at this critical juncture, our chair is the subject of a restraining order filed by her own future brother-in-law. She is embroiled in a public legal battle that alleges stalking and harassment. She is distracted. She is compromised." He looked directly at me. "We need stability. We have a strategic partnership offer from Ironclad Solutions on the table, an offer that guarantees capital infusion and growth. But we cannot execute that deal while the chair is fighting a personal war in the tabloids. Therefore, I move that Anna Simmons be removed as chair effective immediately, and that I be appointed interim chair to oversee the transition and the partnership vote." There was a murmur of assent from the far end of the table. I saw 2 members nod. They were scared. They saw the falling stock price and they wanted a scapegoat. "Mr. Sterling looked at me. "Miss Simmons, you have the floor to respond." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was crystal clear. I looked around the room. I looked at Elise Marrow, who looked worried. I looked at Kenji Holt, who gave me a subtle nod. "I do not deny the chaos." I said, my voice was steady. "I do not deny that the last 2 weeks have been a nightmare for this company's reputation." Gordon looked surprised. He expected a fight. He expected me to scream about conspiracies. "I want to start by apologizing." I continued. "I owe this board an apology. I underestimated the threat. I assumed that because I was honest, I was safe. I assumed that because I followed the rules, I would be protected. I was wrong. My failure was not that I was distracted. My failure was that I did not realize my family had been targeted as a vector for corporate espionage until it was almost too late." I signaled to Sonia. She handed me the remote for the presentation screen. "Gordon says I am compromised." I said, "He is right. I was compromised. But not by my own instability. I was compromised by a coordinated infiltration operation designed to force the sale of this company to Velmont Dynamics." I clicked the remote. The screen came alive. "Exhibit A." I said. The log of the spoofed email appeared. 10 days ago. An email was sent to my executive assistant, tricking her into handing over access to the board portal. That email originated from a spoofed server. I clicked again. "Exhibit B." The leak of the confidential memo regarding Project Helios. This leak caused our stock to dip 4%, triggering the initial panic. I clicked again. And Exhibit C, the leak of Project Obsidian. A murmur went through the room. "Project Obsidian?" one of the members asked. "I thought that was top secret." "It was." I said. "It was so secret that it didn't exist. It was a barium meal, a trap. I created a fake acquisition document. I watermarked it with a unique digital signature, and I gave it to exactly one person. I pointed to Lila. I gave it to my sister, Lila Simmons." Lila flinched, but she kept her head up. 6 hours later, I said, "That document appeared on the Silicon Whisperer, the blog that has been attacking us for weeks." I clicked the remote. The metadata log appeared. "This is the forensic analysis of the upload." I said, "The document was uploaded from a device named D_Vance_Consulting_Maine. That is the laptop of Derek Vance, my sister's fiancé, the man who filed a restraining order against me to stop me from exposing him." I looked at Gordon. Derek Vance didn't leak that document because he cares about transparency. He leaked it to tank the stock, and he did it using access he gained through my sister. Gordon's face reddened. This is highly speculative. Anna, you trapped your own sister? This just proves you are unstable. It proves I am thorough." I shot back, "But that is not all." I clicked the remote one last time. The spreadsheet appeared. The board_profile_matrix. We recovered this file from Derek's cloud drive. I said, "It is a targeting matrix. It lists every person in this room. It lists your pressure points, your debts, your secrets. I saw the board members lean in. I saw the shock on their faces as they saw their own names. "It lists Mr. Price," I said, pointing to the screen. "And next to his name, it lists gambling debt, Macau, and strategy, promise interim chair role." The room exploded. "That is a lie," Gordon shouted, jumping to his feet. "That is a fabrication." "Is it?" I asked, because the metadata shows this file was created 3 weeks ago. Before the leak started, before the restraining order. This was the plan. "Gordon, Derek creates the chaos. You use the chaos to remove me, and then you hand the company to Holloway Capital, who hands it to Velmont." I turned to Maris Holtain. Maris sat perfectly still. She didn't look at the screen. She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "This is very dramatic. Ms. Simmons," Maris said. Her voice cut through the noise like a knife. "But it is also irrelevant." "Irrelevant?" Kenji asked. "We just showed you proof of a conspiracy. You showed us a spreadsheet created by a consultant," Maris said dismissively. "A consultant who, by your own admission, you have a personal vendetta against. This is not evidence. This is a family feud spilling onto a projector screen." Maris stood up. She smoothed her skirt. "Holloway Capital is not interested in your spy games. We are interested in returns. And right now, Northglass is a toxic asset. If this board does not vote to remove Anna Simmons and approve the partnership with Ironclad today, Holloway will withdraw its capital support. We will dump our stock. We will trigger a run on the bank." She looked around the room. "Choose chaos, or choose growth. It is that simple." The threat hung in the air. It was a death sentence, even with the evidence of the conspiracy. The board was terrified of losing the money. I could see them wavering. Money always talks louder than truth. Then, the doors at the back of the room rattled. We all turned. Through the glass wall, we could see the reception area. Derek Vance was there. He was arguing with the security guards. He was wearing his suit, looking frantic and earnest. He was holding a briefcase. He pointed at the door, then at me. He couldn't get in, but his presence was a physical blow. Lila let out a small, strangled sound. She was shaking so hard the table vibrated. "He is here," she whispered. "He said he would come." I looked at Derek through the glass. He locked eyes with me. He didn't look scared of the evidence. He looked confident. He knew Maris had just dropped the hammer. He was here to take a victory lap. I looked back at the board. They were looking at Derek, then at Maris, then at me. They were breaking. I needed the nuclear option. "Sonia," I said. Sonia reached into her briefcase. She pulled out a thick, sealed packet. It was wrapped in evidence tape. I placed the packet on the table in front of Maris. "What is this?" Maris asked, looking at it with distaste. "That," I said, "is a whistleblower complaint addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Justice, and Northglass's primary liability insurers." Maris narrowed her eyes. "Inside that packet," I said, my voice ringing out, "is the full evidence chain, the spoofed emails, the bot farm receipts, the payments from Holloway to Vector Strategy for the smear campaign, and the communications between your office and Derek Vance coordinating the timing of the stock dumps." I leaned forward. "If you withdraw your funding." "Maris, if you dump the stock, Sonia presses send on the digital copy of this packet." The room went deadly silent. "You wouldn't." Maris whispered, "If you send that, the SEC freezes the company. The stock goes to zero. You destroy your own legacy. I will burn it to the ground before I let you steal it." I said, "I meant it," and she saw that I meant it. "I am not begging you to keep me as chair." I said, "I am telling you that if you try to remove me, I will take the entire house down with me. I will trigger an investigation that will tie Holloway Capital up in court for 10 years. You want to talk about toxic assets? I will make you radioactive." Maris stared at me. For the first time, the steel cracked. She looked at the packet. She knew the risk. A federal investigation into insider trading would destroy her firm. Then, Lila stood up. Everyone turned to her. She looked small in the big gray suit. But she wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at the board. I want to speak, she said. Her voice was trembling. Mr. Sterling looked at me. I nodded. Miss Simmons, you have the floor, he said. Lila took a deep breath. My name is Lila Simmons, she said, and I am the leak. Gordon opened his mouth to speak, but Lila held up a hand. I let him use me, she said, tears starting to fall. Derek, he told me that Anna was unstable. He told me that she was ruining the company. He told me that if I helped him, I would be saving the family. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be important. She looked at Derek through the glass wall. He had stopped arguing with the guards. He was watching her. He coached me, she said. He told me exactly what to say to provoke Anna on camera. He told me to mention our mother. He told me to question her leadership in front of people. He wrote the script, and when I wrote my wedding vows, he edited them to sound like a business merger. She looked at Maris. He isn't a tech executive, she said. He is a fraud, and he works for you. I saw the emails. I saw the payments for asset acquisition. That is what you called me. An asset. She turned to the board members. My sister isn't crazy, she said, her voice gaining strength. She is the only person who tried to stop this. I betrayed her. I stole from her. And she still tried to save me. If you fire her, you are firing the only person who actually cares about this company. The rest of you are just assets to them. She sat down, burying her face in her hands. The silence that followed was heavy. The shame in the room was palpable. Gordon Price looked down at his papers. Elise Marrow wiped her eye. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. We have a motion on the floor, he said. The motion is to remove Anna Simmons as chair. We will proceed to a vote. It was a roll call vote. Gordon Price? Yes, Gordon said, his voice quiet. Maris Holtain? Yes, she spat. Elise Marrow? No, Elise said firmly. Kenji Holt? Hell no. Kenji said. The count went around the table. It was agonizing. Yes, no, yes, no. It came down to the last member, a quiet man named David, who represented the pension fund. He had been wavering all morning. David looked at the sealed packet on the table. He looked at Lila. Weeping silently, he looked at me. No. He said, Mr. Sterling tallied the votes. The motion fails. 7 votes to 5. He announced, Anna Simmons retains the chair. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a month. Maris Holtain stood up. She grabbed her briefcase. She looked at me with a venom that was almost impressive. You think you won? She hissed. You have a divided board. You have a damaged brand. And you have a sister who is a liability. Watch your back. Anna. Holloway doesn't forget. She walked out. She didn't look at Gordon. She walked straight past the glass wall, ignoring Derek completely. Gordon Price sat there, deflated. He knew his coup had failed. He knew I had the spreadsheet with his gambling debts. He was a dead man walking. I stood up. The meeting is adjourned, I said. We walked out of the conference center 15 minutes later. Security escorted us. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was wet and black. The air smelled of ozone and exhaust. Derek was waiting by the curb. He wasn't with Maris. He was alone. He was leaning against his car, smoking a cigarette. He looked relaxed, unbothered. Sonia moved to intercept him, but I held up a hand. I walked up to him. I stayed exactly 10 feet away. It is over. Derek, I said, the vote failed. Maris is gone. We have the evidence. If you come near Lila, or me, or Northglass again, I will release the packet. Derek took a drag of his cigarette. He exhaled slowly, the smoke curling into the gray sky. You played a good game. Anna, he said, I admit it. I underestimated the nuclear option. I didn't think you had it in you to threaten the regulator. He looked at Lila, who was standing behind me, refusing to look at him. No goodbye kiss? He asked, a mock pout on his lips. Lila stepped out from behind me. She looked at him. Her eyes were swollen, but they were clear. I am not an asset, she said. And you are not a giant. You are small. Derek. You are so small. Derek laughed. It was a cold, empty sound. Small? I just walked away with a consulting fee that is bigger than your trust fund. Lila. I did my job. The acquisition didn't go through. But the volatility play? We made a killing on the short sell. He threw the cigarette on the ground and crushed it with his expensive Italian shoe. This isn't a fairy tale. Anna, he said, looking at me. The bad guy doesn't go to jail. He just moves on to the next target. Northglass is wounded. You are wounded. Your relationship with your sister is cracked. I broke things that you can't glue back together. He opened his car door. And hey, he said, flashing that perfect predatory smile one last time. Thanks for the memories. The wedding planning was fun. He got in the car and drove away. I stood there, watching his taillights disappear into the traffic of Briarhaven. He was right. It wasn't a clean victory. The company was safe for now. But the stock was battered. My reputation was scarred. Gordon was still on the board, a lurking enemy, and Lila. I turned to my sister. She was hugging herself, shivering in the cold. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. Anna. I reached out and pulled her into a hug. She collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder. It is okay, I said. We are okay. But as I held her, looking up at the glass tower of North Glass Systems, I knew that the definition of family had changed. Trust had been weaponized. Innocence had been lost. I had won the battle. I had kept the chair. But I had learned the hardest lesson of all. In the world of power, there are no safe spaces, not even at the dinner table. And as I watched the clouds break over the city, I realized that I would never be the steady, quiet sister again. I was something else now. I was a survivor, and God help anyone who tried to come for mine again. Thank you so much for listening to Sister Saeed. My fiancé works at a tech giant, until he walked into the board meeting I was chairing. This story was a wild ride of corporate espionage, gaslighting, and the lengths we go to protect the people we love, even when they make it impossible. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from the busy streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or somewhere halfway across the world? Let me know in the comments below. And I have a question for you. Do you think Anna did the right thing by threatening to burn down her own company to save it? Or should she have found another way? I want to hear your thoughts on the nuclear option. If you enjoyed this story and want more gripping tales of betrayal and justice, please hit that subscribe button for revenge stories. We have so many more secrets to uncover. Until next time, stay sharp and watch who you let into your boardroom.